How do we guard against the natural tendency of governments not to want to be equal stakeholders, but to want to be in charge of things?
Vice president of a big country in Latin America that was telling me, listen, the internet is very powerful. We like power, so we're going to control it. And I think he was the most plain-spoken one of all. I mean, he spoke about in a way that I think probably goes through the mind of many governments. So we are very aware of what governments would like to do.
You can fill in the blank there for just about any dictator around the world.
Right.
They like power. They want to control things. That was the president and CEO of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, also known as ICANN, expressing his view about the future of the web and who is going to govern it. That's where we bring in our roundtable discussion for today. And with us now is the president of Citizens for Self-Governance, attorney Mark Meckler, and the managing partner at the DCBA Law Firm and Policy Firm, Michael Barnes. It's good to have you both with us.
Good to be with you.
Mark, let's start with you. I know you're a small government guy. This group, ICANN, they see the privatization of the internet coming very soon here. What is your take on this issue? Because it seems like if you look towards Capitol Hill, you have members from both parties essentially saying the same thing. Let's keep the internet free and open. But what exactly does that mean?
Well, you know, I also have a long history. I go back as an internet attorney back to 1993. And ICANN has actually done an extraordinarily good job of remaining neutrality on the world playing field of the internet, overseen by the United States, which is really the only major nation in the world promoting liberty and freedom worldwide. So I like the scheme as it currently exists. The idea of Russia and China and other and possibly terrorist sponsoring states like Iran and Syria having input on how the internet is governed, I find it terrifying. I just think it's a really bad idea. I think it portends poorly for the future of the internet.
Well, Michael, we hear about these concerns about countries like Russia and China, which already in some ways control the internet for their population. Do you see that getting worse if this goes through? And it seems like a done deal. Is there anything that can be done to stop this?
Yes, I don't think it's a done deal because Congress has prohibited the executive branch from spending federal funding to get out of the scenario of oversight of ICANN. And so there really shouldn't be this switchover come September because the government's prohibited from doing it, or at least spending federal funds from doing it. But to the extent that there's this open question, it makes sense for the U.S. to continue to provide oversight in light of the fact that we know that there are other countries and other organizations that want to restrict access. And we want to make sure that we continue to operate the internet in an open way, in a fair way. Lots of changes that need to be made to ICANN. There needs to be reform at ICANN, considering, for example, that they've got the .sucks domain, which is effectively requiring companies to buy their way out of these sorts of bad, sticky situations. But without the U.S., there's no greater likelihood that there's going to be reform of that nature.
I know Miranda bought John Bachman .sucks, and she's holding that over my head.
I'm sorry, guys.
We'll keep our eye on this. This is still a very concerning issue, guys. We wanted to bring it up because it's back in the news, but we'll keep an eye on this and have you both back to talk about it closer to September. But let's shift gears now.
Let's do it. Let's talk about Senator Marco Rubio. He recently said he wouldn't have invaded Iraq back in 2003. That stands in direct contrast to a comment he made in March that the Iraq war wasn't a mistake. Is this a policy shift, Mark?
Well, it certainly sounds like a policy shift, and it concerns me on a broader basis. You know, Marco Rubio among the base, he's well liked, but there is a certain skepticism that people hold in the back of their minds because his switch in position on immigration. So when you see him switch positions on whether he feels like the Iraq war was a mistake or not, it's not so much about the position itself. It's about is he turning into another politician that switches positions when it's politically convenient. So I do think it's damaging, and it will definitely cause people to think twice about Marco Rubio.
Michael, your thoughts?
I think any coverage for Marco Rubio at this point is good coverage in light of the fact that many voters are still getting to know what his positions are. They don't know how to contrast what was previously said and what is now being said. But the bigger question is, why in the world is the Republican Party still looking over hypotheticals from 12 years ago? We've got enough crises confronting us, especially on the international scene, that we shouldn't be looking back. We need to be looking forward. And the Republican Party is missing a great deal of opportunity to focus on the flaws of the current administration and how policy can be improved, rather than looking back and critiquing their prior Republican administration.
But that is why we look back in time. We look at history so we don't repeat and make the same mistakes again. And I don't really think it's the Republican Party that's doing this. It's the media that's doing this. I mean, am I right, Mark?
I mean, there's
I
an
agree with that.
opportunity
Look-
for every candidate to say, yeah, let's not relitigate these past issues. Let's focus on the current issues ahead of us.
Mark, you were
So
getting
I
ready to say
disagree with
something?
that. I think that's weak. I think these guys are presidential candidates. I think they're going to have to answer every difficult question. If they don't have to answer it now, they're going to have to answer it at the debates. If they're not prepared, if they can't handle explaining what their position is and if they've shifted and why they've shifted, then they're frankly not ready for prime time.
Yeah, and this came from an interview with what was supposed to be somewhat of a
Right.
friendly source with Megyn Kelly and Fox News. And what was surprising, I think, is not only how long it took Jeb to recover and finally state his position in a very clear way, but also how quickly the rest of the candidates jumped on the opportunity to point out this mistake. So it was
Right.
partially, self-inflicted wounds by
What,
their
the
own
cat
party.
calling the kettle black? Is that what you're saying? Kind of like making
No,
fun of them, and they're
I
having
think Michael
a
has a
difficult time
great
with it
point.
too?
You can't go back and relay history, but also Mark has a good point. These questions are going to come up. They need to be better prepared. We got more questions coming up, guys.
Yep.
We got to take a short commercial break. We're coming right back for the rest of the roundtable after this. And we pick back up with our roundtable discussion. Please welcome back in Presidents of Citizens for Self-Governance, Attorney Mark Meckler, and Managing Partner at the DCBA Law Firm, Michael Barnes. Good to have you both back with us. One more comment we want to make about Jeb Bush, not just in a little bit of hot water for his comments about Iraq, but some were critical of a comment he made about his new Apple Watch. Let's take a listen.
I think we should repeal Obamacare if given the opportunity. On this device in 5 years will be applications that will allow me to manage my health care in ways that 5 years ago were not even possible. We'll be able to guide our own health care decisions in a way that will make us healthy. And ultimately, we have to get to a health system away from a disease system.
Well, this soundbite upset a lot of folks, including Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the congresswoman and chair of the DNC. Michael, why doesn't Jeb stick to the script? I mean, I don't know. I know what he was trying to say here. There's a new
Okay,
era
translation.
There's a new era of technology,
Okay.
and technology can do things that we don't necessarily need the government to do for us, and that comes into play with managing our health care. Too critical of Jeb Bush, those who are criticizing him on this, Mark?
Well, first of all, I'd say
No.
Debbie Wasserman Schultz is about the least credible person on the left today. Remember, this is a woman who said about Scott Walker that he was grabbing women by the hair and dragging them back and giving them the back of their hand. She just shouldn't have a credible place in American political dialogue today. But I do think that Jeb was inartful. I don't think he addressed Obamacare head on, pointing to an Apple Watch, really out of touch with the problem of most Americans. And so I think it was inartful, but I just wouldn't be listening to Wasserman Schultz on just about anything.
Fair enough. Michael, is this a problem we're going to see from Jeb? Because whether or not you translated that answer into what he was trying to say, it still did not sound good, I guess, in hindsight. Pardon the pun.
Jeb Bush is poorly prepared and he has no message discipline. If he wants to talk about the Affordable Care Act, which is a policy matter, he needs to talk about the policies and then perhaps he can incorporate technology as a part of that. But to refer just to technology as an alternative to a policy without suggesting what would be in place of the current Affordable Care Act, it was a really bad move on his part and shows that he's got a lot more homework to do.
I think more than anything, and I'm just going to say this, it's not a comment for or against Bush. I think he just needs to polish up a little bit. He's a little out of practice.
Well, I know we're going to see him in that kind of roundtable, town hall type situation this week. That seems to be what he does best, taking questions from a friendly field of folks. So we'll
see what happens
on the campaign trail.
Let's talk about yesterday's biker brawl. You guys all heard about this in Waco, Texas. 9 people died and 18 were injured. Take a listen.
It was a very gruesome, very violent crime scene. You could tell that there were numerous rounds exchanged. I saw everything from pistol casings to rifle casings.
Police are still combing through that evidence and nearly 200 arrests have been made. I just want to get your overall reaction to this, Mark. Police say that they were aware that trouble may be brewing here and actually contacted the restaurant where the shootout took place. Now, there's conflicting stories. The restaurant is saying, we had no idea this was going to happen. Don't blame us. Police are saying you had somewhat of an idea. Mark, what's your reaction?
Well, I mean, look, these kinds of things have taken place literally throughout American history. There's always kind of an underworld element. At one point in our history, it was really the mob and the mafia that was responsible for these kinds of things. These biker gangs have been growing in power and scope based on the drug trade. So I think the underlying issue is the really dangerous drug trade and the money that it brings and the power that it brings to these groups.
And Michael, just to me, I was like, is this like Sons of Anarchy? I mean, that's what it reminded me of. And then just, what, a week ago, we were talking about the what was it, the mob out of that pizzeria in New York. I'm
Well,
like,
it shows
this
you
is
that
like,
this crime element is still very much here. This might be a new incarnation of the mafia, but they are all charged. All 192 people are charged now, Michael, with some sort of
it just
connection
seems
to
crazy
organized crime.
that this is happening in this day and age. Michael, your thought.
It is nuts. I mean, I feel very isolated to be surprised at a story by this nature. But one thing that we need to point out is that there's a lot of scrutiny now against law enforcement. Law enforcement, of course, is dealing with its own bad apples, but they deserve a lot of credit here in Texas because they managed to deal with that entire situation. Not only were there no innocent bystanders who were killed, but none of them were injured. And for them to have dealt with this scenario in a way that kept all the civilians protected, they deserve a great deal of credit.
Yeah, we saw reports of these bikers actually shooting at police. I don't know if those were true or not, but then you see how the police handled it in a very surgical kind of way where they had the bikers all lined up there. They were processing them out in the field, doing pat-downs on them. I thought it was impressive to see the way the cops responded to this, and you're absolutely right, Michael. That's what you expect from our law enforcement in a difficult time for law enforcement to do their jobs. And I think the reason why we wanted to bring up this kind of ongoing debate between the restaurant owners and the local police department is it highlights the difficult situation police are in nowadays when they want to be proactive, but they're also trying to balance our rights, Fourth Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, and so forth and so on. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, the big question I ask is, where's Al Sharpton when we have this kind of violence, right? I'm surprised he hasn't shown up.
Well, he's dealing with his daughter's lawsuit, I think. She sued the city of New York for spraining her ankle or something like that. But, guys, we have a lot to talk about. We'll have you back very soon. Great conversation today. We appreciate you both being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, Michael Barnes and Mark Meckler there, covering a wide range of topics.
Yes.
As we like to do on our roundtable.
Yeah, Al Sharpton's daughter. Wow, that's some damaging evidence against her. We'll talk
What, her
about
lawsuit against the city of New York?
Yeah, they kind of caught her walking just fine. We'll just put it like that. We'll be right back.
Topic for another day.